Hello and welcome to the Savage Stream, the weekly live stream where we talk all things Star Trek. And today we are going to be covering the top 10 best time travel episodes from Star Trek Voyager. So if you're watching live, say hello to me in the chat. And if you're watching on the replay, hit hashtag replay in the comments so that I know you were here. Let's get started with episode number 10. This comes from season 1, episode 3, and it is called Parallax. So in this episode, this is really early in the season. So episode 3 it's almost episode 2 because the pilot of Star Trek Voyager was a two-parter, just like the pilot of The Next Generation. So it depends on what streaming service you're looking at. This may say episode 2 or episode 3. It's very early on, so we are having that clash of crews because in this episode, the Maquis have joined with the Voyager crew, the Starfleet crew, but they haven't really kind of like merged or combined yet. So this is the episode where we get all the angst, where we get all the drama between the two crews. That's not the time travel part. That's just the backstory. This episode actually opens up with B'Elanna Torres punching in the face one of the engineers, one of the Starfleet engineers, because she's like, I know better than you or something. I don't even remember what started this fight. But miraculously, it ends up with B'Elanna Torres being promoted to chief engineer. In any case, in this episode, the ship is traveling through space, trying to get home. They realize they are 70,000 light years from home. And they get a distress call, or maybe they don't get a distress call. I think they just see that there's a ship that's trapped near this quantum singularity. So they're like, okay, we need to find a way to save that ship. They try to communicate with it. The comms apparently are down. They can't connect with it in any way. It doesn't seem to have power to get out of this kind of sinkhole that it's in. And so they go to rescue it, right? They try to rescue it. They can't kind of get to it. They try a tractor beam, but as soon as they kind of hit it with the tractor beam, it causes even more damage on their ship. So they go, you know what? We need help. We passed an M-class planet a while back that I guess was warp capable or whatever. Let's go make some allies. Let's get some friends. Let's get some help so that we can save the ship. Well, they leave, or so they think, but after traveling for however long, they come right back to where they were and they're facing the ship again. And they're like, what the heck is going on? Come to find out, they are in kind of like a fishbowl. They're the ship that's trapped near this quantum singularity. They're the ones that actually need help. And everything they're doing to try to help the other ship was damaging their own ship because something science echoes. I don't know. So it's technically not a time... it's not a time travel episode the way we typically think of time travel episodes, which is where someone goes into the past or someone goes into the future and something crazy happens. This is... I forget what they said in the episode. So if you know, type it in the chat, but I think it's maybe like a 2-hour delay or a 3-hour delay or something like that. Maybe it was 6 hours, but this time travel is a very small temporal echo where they're seeing themselves. So it's not a huge, it's not that standard thing that we typically think of for time travel episodes. However, here's the interesting thing. How do we rescue ourselves? We can't rescue that other ship. We need to rescue this ship. How do we rescue ourselves? So they discover that they are in this quantum singularity. So they were like, okay, we must have snagged it at some point and kind of poked a little hole and found ourselves inside of this fishbowl. So we just got to scan for the hole. They find the hole, but unfortunately it's shrunk so that it's too small for Voyager to fit through, because of course it is. So they decide to take a shuttle to the hole and blast it with some kind of energy that's going to make the hole widen enough for Voyager to go through. So Janeway and B'Elanna go take a shuttle. They do this. They widen the hole. Unfortunately, something, and their shuttle gets damaged. So they can't communicate with Voyager. When they turn the shuttle around to get back on the ship, they see there's 2 Voyagers, the one they left and the one that's in the temporal loop. And so they have to kind of make a gamble of which ship is the right ship. And of course, they only have one shot at this. And if they don't get the right ship, Voyager will escape free and clear, but they will be trapped in this little fishbowl forever. For some reason, they can't just transport them back to the ship. Don't remember why, something science. But I do know that because comms are down, Chakotay is not able to know that they're in trouble, to know that they can't come back. So anyways, they widen the hole, they figure out the right ship, they get on the ship in the nick of time, and they escape the little hole, and then all is well. And the Maquis crew and the Starfleet crew start to move towards harmony. So it's an interesting episode. I would say it's really heavy on the techno babble. So if you haven't seen this episode in a while, maybe give it a skip. It's not great, but it is interesting. And because it's not great, that's why it's number 10 on my list of all the different time travel episodes. But it is interesting, and it is good to see that clash of crews, because that's exactly what you would expect, right? we talk about sometimes how Star Trek is supposed to be this utopic world where everything is happy go lucky, at least for people in the Federation. But any type of utopia in my mind is impossible if that utopia includes humans, right? Because people, we just have different viewpoints, different ways of going about things, different goals, different values. So there's always going to be clashing. So what I appreciate about this episode and several of the episodes in season 1 is I like seeing the two crews having to work together and then coming to a compromise, as opposed to what would normally happen where it's like wave a magic wand and now we're all besties, right? So I think that's like the good backdrop, the good B plot behind this scientific mystery. Okay, so I'm going to check the chat and then we're going to head to episode number 9. Hello, 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 Chaotic Truth. And not Nadia. Crown Reese says salute. And I love Crown Reese. That's like my nickname, so I love that. Chaotic Truth says Futures in Part 1 will always be the best. I could not agree more. Okay, so let's head on to good pronunciation. I know I said it wrong and then I said it right. Let's move on to episode number 9 of best time travel episodes for Star Trek Voyager. This comes from season 1. This is episode 7, and this is Eye of the Needle. This episode is super interesting, and I'm really glad they put it into season 1 because, and Nadia pointed this out to me earlier via email, that there's no crew quite like Voyager when it comes to time travel, with the exception of Discovery. So I would say like in the old school ones, like kind of from the 60s all the way to the 2000s or whatever, Voyager was the time travel series. It was all about time travel. It felt like every other episode. For Star Trek The Next Generation, time travel, I feel like they did it maybe like 5 times out of all 7 seasons. Maybe a little bit, maybe 7 times out of all 7 seasons. But with Voyager, I feel like they do it like 5 times a season. They do a lot of time travel. But I really enjoy this one because we don't know it's time travel until the very middle towards the end. So in Eye of the Needle, the crew finds this wormhole. And they're like, oh my gosh, this wormhole could possibly get us back to the Alpha Quadrant. Because remember, they're stranded and now we're only 7 episodes in. So they still feel that fresh hope of maybe getting home, right? So they're like, okay, let's check out this wormhole. Let's see how stable it is. Maybe we can travel through it. Come to find out, this wormhole is what they call a micro wormhole. The opening of the wormhole is 12 inches in diameter. It's 1 foot wide. So it's not going to be big enough for the Voyager to fit through. So they're like, dang it. Okay, well, let's send a probe through it anyways and just see where the wormhole empties out at. So they shoot a probe into it. And I guess the wormhole, maybe it gets even smaller as it goes because the probe gets stuck inside the wormhole. And also, do they even have a probe that's smaller than 1 foot? Apparently. But the probe gets stuck in the wormhole. And, but it's able to send telemetry back or whatever. And they're like, oh my gosh, the wormhole is going all the way to the Alpha Quadrant. And they're like, oh, like so close, but so far. And as they're scanning and whatever, there's a ship that comes near the wormhole. And so they communicate with the ship through the probe. The probe becomes like this relay where they can send messages to each other through the probe. And come to find out, it's a Romulan ship, which we're not friends with the Romulans at this point in the Federation's history. So it takes some convincing to get this Romulan, who I believe he's a scientist, though. I think he's a scientist studying the micro wormhole, but I don't remember the details. It takes a little bit of convincing, but he's not like super militant. So he's not like, death to the Federation. Instead, he's like, okay, let's listen. So they actually come to an understanding where they go, okay, look, even though we can't travel through this wormhole, maybe we can beam each other through the wormhole. Which to me, saying that out loud sounds crazy. Like, no. Like, I would not be the first one to try that. I wouldn't. I'd be like, can we start with a plant or like a ball or something? I don't know. Because we've never seen beaming through a wormhole before. And I guess even though it was small, maybe the pinch in space was just really, I don't really know. I've never seen beaming through a wormhole. So I was like, I wouldn't try it. But this is what they decided to do. And for some reason, which I also don't remember because I haven't seen this episode in a while, I'm just going like off of what I remember. The scientist, the Romulan scientist, volunteers to be the guinea pig. Why? Who knows? But he volunteers to be the guinea pig, and so he beams over onto Voyager, and he's like, "Whoa, what's going on? Oh, it's a Federation ship or whatever." And they're like talking, and they're like, "Okay, this is great. You gotta help all of us. We're trapped here. Help us get back home." So he's like, "Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Beam me back to my ship. I'm gonna get a huge like a huge ship, either from the Federation or from the Romulans. I'll get somebody to come, and then we can beam everybody over." And I'm guessing Janeway would then self-destruct the ship because she's not leaving that technology there. But they would beam everybody over. And then they could just get them back to the Alpha Quadrant or get them back to the Federation ships or something like that. And they're like, yes, yes, okay, this is totally going to work. Unfortunately, they come to find out that this Romulan is from 20 years in the past. So this micro wormhole is not only an opening in space, but it's an opening in time. Because I feel like we also haven't had that. Have we had a wormhole that travels through like time periods? I don't think so. So that was also super interesting. But then they go, oh man, well, we can beam back. Like we can technically beam back, but we're going to beam back 20 years before we left. And that's going to break the temporal prime directive, which we discover now at this moment is a thing. There's a temporal prime directive and we have to follow that. So they're like, we can't contaminate the whole timeline for the past 20 of our years. So we have to stay here. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a message. So in 20 years time, like right after we disappear, send the Federation a message saying we're alive, we're in the Delta Quadrant, we found the Maquis, we're one happy family, whatever, tell our loved ones tell my fiance I'm still here, so don't get remarried or whatever, just sending messages. And so this Romulan's like, okay, I will do that. And the deal is because if you do it that way, then it's not going to contaminate the timeline, right? It's not going to change anything. So they're like, okay, we have to keep going the way we're going because temporal prime directive. So we have to stay here in the Delta Quadrant. But if you give them our message, maybe they can figure out something on their end to get us home faster. Romulan scientist agrees to it. They shake hands. All is well. They beam him back to his ship. And he's like, I wish you well. And they're like, I wish you well too. He goes off on his merry way. And then Tuvok is like, Captain, I did a scan on his ship. And then I looked at our database about that ship. It turns out that guy actually dies 4 years before our ship disappears. So there was no way for him to keep that promise to send the message to Starfleet. And they're like, well, maybe he like willed it to somebody that they would send it on his behalf in the case of his death or something like that. But there's literally no way to check. There's no way for them to know unless they get back home. So I think that episode's great. It's actually really charming. It's really interesting. I think the pacing's really good. I think the characters are super good. Highly recommend Eye of the Needle. I'm going to check the chat and then we're going to hit episode number 8. Hold on a second. Let me scroll on up. Okay, Chaotic Truth says Relativity was an incredible time travel episode. I totally agree. PS2 Cypher says hi. Windgrace says, I love this one. Right? It's so good. This is a legit good one. Nadia says, okay, Voyager was ridiculous with the time travel for real. We are in episode 7 of season 1, and it's the second time travel episode. It might even be the third, honestly. I think it's the third time travel episode by like episode 7. I think it's the third time they do some kind of time travel stuff, which is nuts. Nadia says, although Eye of the Needle is a very cool episode, it's not quite your traditional time travel episode, but it's a good one. And the ending is really sad. The ending is really sad, right? Like I felt it when Tuvok, I'm almost like, why did he look that up? It's like, what benefit did it do to steal away the little drop, the little wisp of hope that people were holding on to? But yeah, when you find out like, oh yeah, he dies before you can even deliver our message, you're like, okay. And then it's just like the episode goes away. It just ends. And which is not typical of Voyagers. Usually Voyager ends on a pretty, I think, emotionally neutral tone most of the time. Every once in a while, it's a little happy. And every once in a while, like this time, it's a little sad. PS2 Cypher says the temporal prime directive is always writer dependent. Yeah, the prime directive, and then Nadia says 100% just like the prime directive. The prime directive really bothers me. Like the idea of it doesn't. I think the idea of it is really genius. Like don't mess with the evolution of a culture. I think that's genius. But I think by creating such a thing as writers on the show, I think they just like wrote themselves into a big corner because every time the prime directive is brought up, it's either to A, completely ignore it, or B, follow it to the letter in the face of horrible devastation, right? So either way, something is getting totally destroyed when we invoke the prime directive. Then the temporal prime directive is a little bit different because it doesn't come up as often except for on Voyager, which it comes up all the time because Voyager is always time traveling. But with the temporal prime directive also, I feel like there's less potential damage, especially if the time travel is to the future, because they're always like, oh, you came back from the future, you can't tell us what happened because it might affect something. But like it won't, because the future you saw is one potential future. it'll affect you though, because maybe you're going to make different choices based on what you saw and you can't unsee them. So you can't make different choices. You know what I mean? So it may affect your choices, which may have a ripple effect. But I think because the temporal directive has past and future implications, it doesn't seem as crazy to me as the prime directive, as far as whenever they invoke it and you're just like, why would you do that? Like, why would you let that whole planet die? Oh, because they're pre-warp. What? Versus temporal prime directive, where it's like, yeah, I guess don't tell that Romulan guy that he dies, because that's sad and I wouldn't want to know that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, the temporal prime directive seems easier to maintain, and it makes me less irritated as a person, I think. PS2 Cypher says, I loved that episode, super good. Wingrace says, retroactively the fourth since since 7 time travels back to the pilot later. So it's the fourth time travel episode in 7 episodes, technically, if we count 7 time traveling back to Utopia Planitia, which is hilarious. Chaotic Truth says, Voyager had to do time travel episodes because the audience was not used to the unknown Delta Quadrant. Yeah, that may be true. I don't really know the reason why. And honestly, I'm not complaining. It wasn't until I went with a rewatch with a friend of mine who hadn't seen the show before, where she was like, we're like 4 episodes in. I think we're 5 episodes in. She was like, why have we done time travel episodes 3 times in 5 episodes? And I was like, you know what? Voyager does do a lot of time travel. And that revelation came to me earlier this year. So that was brand new for me to realize how much time traveling this ship does. Which, like I said, is only topped by Discovery, because Discovery's time travel was so much more epic. Okay, going to episode number 8 on the list. This is a 2-parter. So it comes from season 3, episodes 8 and 9, and it is called Future's End. Now, this is the episode where they go back to 1996, and I'm going to describe the episode in a second, but let me just start by saying I do not like this episode. Like, I don't like these 2 episodes. And I typically don't like episodes. I'm not going to say don't like. I don't love episodes when the space people or the future people travel back to current times, because it's like, that's not why I watch the space show. I watch the space show for the space stuff. And so when it's like, hey, look, that's the street you live on, it just feels very like, it feels more like a reality TV show, and that is not what I signed up for. So part of it may be that. It was really cool, though. It was cool to see Santa Monica and like all these things. And it was cool to see the crew in like 90s clothes. That was kind of fun. But the episode itself, aside from the fact where it's like let's go to the exact present time, aside from that, it's also just kind of boring. It's got some cool parts. It's got some cool elements, and I think really interesting ideas. So I'm glad that they did it, because of like, we get the mobile emitter from it, which is invaluable throughout the rest of the show. But this episode itself, I don't know. The pacing just feels really slow. Maybe it feels like a 90s sitcom, but not very funny. I don't know. Anyways, let me tell you about the episode. Okay, so in Future's End, Voyager is cruising along, minding its own business, where this ship comes out of nowhere. And it's a ship captained by a person named Braxton. And Captain Braxton's like, I have to destroy your ship because you mess up the whole timeline. And I forget what he said, but it was something like, you destroy this and that, and all of Earth gets disintegrated, or whatever he said. It's like the end of everything if Voyager continues on from this moment. So he's like, sorry for you, but I got to destroy you. And Janeway's like, can we talk about this? And Braxton's like, absolutely not, and starts firing. So of course, Janeway's not taking that. So now it's a space battle. And somehow, as this battle ensues, which I don't remember the details behind this, but there's like a rip in time and space or something. And both Voyager and Captain Braxton's little shuttle are both hurtled back through time and all the way back to the Alpha Quadrant, and of course, to Earth directly. Voyager ends up in 1996. Braxton ends up in 1967. So they're like, oh shoot, like, we're in the past. How do we live here? Like, what do we do now? Because of course they can't talk to anybody. They can't mess with anything because temporal prime directive, right? But while they're up in orbit, there is a I don't know, astrophysicist. I'm not really sure her title, but she works at the Griffith Observatory in LA, and she spots Voyager, and she's like, oh my gosh, it's alien life. There's a UFO like right out of orbit, like right near the planet. And so she's super excited about this. So she sends them a signal to be like, greetings, we are friendly Earth people, or whatever. And Voyager gets the signal, and they're like, oh man, we've been spotted. There goes the temporal prime directive. So now they beam down to Earth to try to figure out who spotted them, how much do they know about Voyager, how much, what do they call it, contamination how much contamination of the timeline has happened. So they're rolling around Santa Monica Pier looking for the signal. While they're there, they run into this homeless guy who seems totally crazy, who turns out to be Captain Braxton. So Captain Braxton does not live a happy life. I don't know why things turn so poorly for him once he lands on old school Earth, but it really, really does. Now we come to find out that his shuttle crashed like in the mountains or whatever next to a very enterprising hippie whose name was, I think, Henry or something. Henry Starling. Yeah, Henry Starling. And Henry Starling, I don't know what he does to Braxton, but maybe he hits him on the head really hard. Maybe that's why he's a little bit off in the future. But in any case, he steals this shuttle and he mines it for every scrap of data that it's worth. And he uses that to turn himself into this tech mogul. So he basically pulls a Biff from Back to the Future too, right? He just like takes this technology and little by little introduces it to the market and becomes a super quadrillion billionaire. And he's the person who that astrophysicist is supposed to report to if they ever find any signs of, alien life or ships in orbit or things like this. So she was supposed to report it to him directly and not make any contact, but she broke the rules by making contact. She also reported it though, but she broke the rules by making contact, which means they sent an assassin after her. And that's where Tom and Tuvok get to save the day, and they go through a wild car chase. I mean, this whole episode is full of car chases and space battles and super exciting sounding things. It's just not my favorite. For some reason, the episode itself, you're just watching and you're like, still going, huh? In any case, one of the cool things that happens, because Captain Braxton is from the 29th century, so in the future compared to Voyager, the Doctor gets a mobile emitter, which allows him to exist anywhere. And at some point, Henry Starling kidnaps the Doctor's program from Voyager some kind of way. But anyways, he gets a mobile emitter so that he can go around the ship and not be trapped in sickbay, which I think is super, super cool. One other thing that Starling does that we never see again, probably for the better, is that mobile emitter also has like a feelings chip or ability, and he uses it to torture the Doctor. Like he's like, oh, you've never experienced pain before. Here it is, and let me turn it up to 10 or whatever. And the Doctor's like writhing in pain, and he's like, you're going to do what I say or else. So apparently the 29th century created not only technology to allow holograms to leave, their the holodeck, but also that causes extreme pain inside of holograms, which I'm not totally sure why that would be a thing. My only guess is that they created some kind of technology that gives holograms the ability to feel all kinds of sensations, one of which is pain. And that's the only one that Starling was using to keep the Doctor under control. That's my guess. I don't know. If you have better thoughts, please put it in the chat. But in any case, so he gets that, which is that's one reason why I actually like that they had these episodes, is because the Doctor gets a mobile emitter out of it. They come to find out that the whole destruction that Braxton was afraid of, that he was like, oh, we've got to stop Voyager because it's going to do all this stuff. It actually wasn't Voyager at all. It was Braxton's ship. And it wasn't Braxton, though. It was Starling. So the thief who's like now a tech mogul, he takes the ship and he tries to go into the future, maybe even further past the 29th century, because he has mined this ship, the shuttle, for every scrap of data he could possibly find. And now he's run out of things. And he wants to keep releasing things to the market and making more and more and more obscene amounts of money. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to go even further into the future, steal some more tech, and then come back. But he does not know how to work the controls because he's not a future person. So he ends up messing it up, and then it explodes. And then that's what causes the rip in time and space and destruction of Earth or whatever else Braxton was accusing Janeway of doing. So at the last second, Starling is getting away on the shuttle, and Janeway just opens fire and blows it to pieces in the atmosphere. And the day is saved. That was the solution, because now he can't go into the future and cause a big rupture and all the things. The only downside is that now Voyager is trapped in 1996. So they're sitting in orbit and they're like, well, at least that's done. And right after that explosion, another ship comes out of some time warp from nowhere, and it's Braxton again. But this is like a different version of Braxton. And he's like, Voyager, we see that you are in the wrong time. And they're like, yeah, that's your fault, buddy. And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. That must have been another version of me, but I'm going to take you back to the proper time. And Janeway is like, whoa, if you're taking us places, can you just take us to the Alpha Quadrant? Because we have a long AF trip. Can you just like drop us off out in front of Earth, but like 20, in the future? And Braxton's like, of course not. Temporal prime directive. So Braxton takes them back to the exact point they were when they left the Delta Quadrant. Not one ion closer. And that is the end of the episode. So I think it's got a lot of interesting points and cool twists and interesting character ideas. But the execution, for some reason, is just not there for me. Another thing that I just think is so stupid is they put Tuvok in this do-rag so that they could hide his pointy ears. How many times have we seen crewmen go undercover on a planet and they just surgically alter themselves? Can we count the number of times? So many times. And all you needed to do for Tuvok to blend in was make his ears less pointy. But instead you put a do-rag on him, something that if it slips off even the tiniest amount, people are going to be like, alien, mutant. That was just dumb. That was just dumb and lazy. Especially since, in theory, they still had to put the prosthetics on the actor and then put a do-rag over the prosthetics. Anyways, I'm going to check the chat and we're going to go to episode number 7. Oh, man. Okay. So Chaotic Truth says Futures End was classic. It was absolutely wild, and it showed us aspects of the 29th century, which is super cool because did we get to see that again in the future? No, we have somebody who comes claiming they're from the future. Oh, wait, that was on TNG. Yeah, I think that's the only time we get to see any 29th century stuff other than in the episode Relativity. Windgrace says the part where Chakotay and Torres get kidnapped feels really out of place and rushed. It's really funny you say that, Windgrace, because parts of this episode feel rushed and parts of these episodes feel slow. And I don't know what it is. I remember not liking this when I first saw it, when it was live. I remember being like, oh, cool, it's Santa Monica. But I also remember watching and being like, for a lot of it. But then there's, like I said, the fast car chases. I remember that was really exciting. And, seeing Sarah Silverman was lovely. That was probably, next to the mobile emitter, the other best part of that episode. Best of Trek, worst of Trek says, I actually love Futures End. Yay, somebody loves it. I especially loved it when it first ran in 1996 and how most Trek goes back for a near the year they filmed it. Most Trek does do that. I don't know why though. I don't know why they do that. I wonder if it's like a tradition, so they have to. I don't know. But I'm glad you loved it, because I'm glad somebody loved it, because a lot of effort and heart and soul went into those episodes, obviously. And I wish I loved it. It's almost like, so I don't like cheesecake, but I want to like cheesecake because it looks so good. That's what these episodes are for me. They're cheesecake. I'm like, I want to like these episodes, but I don't like these episodes. Chaotic Truth says, Braxton ended up being homeless in the 20th century. Imagine a man from the future with an insane IQ and knowledge of many centuries being homeless in LA in 1966. What a hellscape. Yeah, and I don't understand that either, because I feel like he's intelligent, he's resourceful. Maybe he's not resourceful, but I feel like if you would have, like, with the Voyager crew, they couldn't stay because, timey-wimey, prime directive and all that. But I feel like if you drop Janeway off in 1996, she'd be good. Like, I don't think she'd end up homeless. I mean, things happen and, but like, I think she's so resourceful that she would figure it out and she would find a way and she would just like slide into society. Even though I guess you're not supposed to because temporal prime directive. But I don't know what happened to Braxton. He just lost it. And this is not the last time we're going to see Braxton losing it. Poor guy. PS2 Cypher says, that was a weird episode. David White says, why couldn't we give the mobile emitter to Moriarty? You know what's so interesting about Moriarty too, from The Next Generation, is that he didn't, he wasn't really, I mean, okay, I was going to say he wasn't really a criminal, but he did like hold the Enterprise hostage a couple times. But I felt like he held the Enterprise hostage. I don't remember why he did it the first time, maybe because he could. But the second time he did it because he wanted freedom. He didn't do it for gain, for riches and fame and all of that. He just wanted to leave the holodeck, be with the love of his life, and explore the universe, which is what we all want, which is exactly what the Enterprise was made for. All these explorers, it's exactly what Voyager's made for. So yeah, I feel like Moriarty with a holo emitter would not be anything to fear. I completely agree, David. That's a good idea. Chaotic Truth says, Sarah Silverman was hot in this episode. Yeah, she's so pretty. And she's so like 90s too. Something about her is very nostalgic. PS2 Cypher says, I need to rewatch that episode. So I guess you've changed your mind from it was a weird episode to I need to rewatch that episode. Nadia says, I like Sarah Silverman in this episode. However, on the Delta Flyers podcast, Robert Duncan McNeil, which is the actor who plays Tom, said that after he worked so well with her, he was offended after she made some disparaging comments about him and the cast. Oh, that's a bummer. I could see that though, because I feel like And I'm not an actress, thank God, but I feel like if you watch interviews with a lot of famous actors, they're always kind of saying the same things about their co-stars. They're always like, they were really dedicated, just really focused, or like just like really vague general things. Because you got to imagine it is a workplace, and we don't always love the people we work with. Like we just don't. But it's completely unprofessional to be like, I had a big grudge against so and so, and we were always arguing behind. You know what I mean? Like that's not appropriate to share either. You have to like be neutral or be positive. So I'm always curious about that. Like, what was it really like on set? And how could we ever find the real truth? Because it could be so damaging to your career, right? Nobody wants to work with somebody who badmouths everybody on the set when they walk away. So yeah, I don't know. And then also Sarah Silverman's a comedian. So her disparaging comments may have been jokes, or they may have been legitimately like harmful and hurtful and mean. I don't know. But that's super sad. Um Al Curtis says good evening. Good evening. Hello. Um Best of Trek, worst of Trek says Sarah is not the best human being for sure. And it was her first big break. Was this her first big break? I thought she was already famous at the time. She wasn't already famous in 1996? Oh, that is so interesting. Um um what is going on in the chat? Yeah, Nadia says that's not a great way to show that you're grateful for having an opportunity that boosted your career. I think it's about not burning bridges unless they absolutely have to be burnt. But that's a policy I live by in my life. It's about not burning bridges unless they absolutely have to be burnt, because sometimes you got to burn stuff down. But 9 times out of 10, there is some way, there's a way to maintain relationships and to not be like cruel or mean or hurt people's feelings, because what's the benefit in that? Anyways, um, Chaotic Truth says, why would a crew member ask Harry Kim on the bridge if they should respond to a radio call from Earth? Was this bad writing? Yeah, whoever knows, because I don't even know. That's a good question for I was going to say that's a good question for Brian, but Brian's not in the chat right now. So the co-host of the Trek Marry Kill podcast, which is a Star Trek podcast, he was a writer. So he was in these writers' rooms, not these specifically because he didn't write for Star Trek, but he knows kind of like what goes on back there and what it's like, and how sometimes you have to do stuff that's kind of dumb because you're under time pressure or whatever. So I don't know the answer to that question, but he probably does. So next time I talk to him, I'm going to ask. Okay, moving on to episode number 7 on the list. This comes from season 3, episode 21, and it is called Before and After. This is the episode where Kes is kind of like Benjamin Buttoning, where she starts at the end of her life, where she's an old woman with a daughter and a grandson. And then throughout the episode, she goes all the way back to the beginning of life, like literally to her conception, like literally to a fertilized egg. She goes all the way back. And this episode, not my favorite. Again, another episode that's not my. I don't know why. This episode just weirds me out, and I honestly don't know why. Because I did rewatch this one today just to be like, what's my deal with this episode? I think it's an interesting concept. It's such a cool idea, right? As you get to see her whole life unfold, especially her being Ocampan, because they only live about 9 years. So when we're doing this flashback of her life, within that 9-year span, we're looking at 90 years of history, which I think is such a cool idea. Even the idea of the Ocampa only living 9 years, but doing these huge jumps in growth each year is really fascinating. So I really like the ideas. I also love that we get to see, how relationships can change on the crew over the years. So the concepts of it, I really like. For some reason, this episode, though, it just makes me feel weird. I don't know if it's because Cass is with Tom and Neelix is there still, but he's cool with it, or because Harry marries Kess's daughter and then they have a kid, but Harry and Tom are the exact same age, and Kess and her daughter look the exact same age. I don't know. Maybe it's just like visuals that weird me out. But here's the idea. Kess has a run-in with the Crinum something. And these are the Crinum from the Year of Hell, the Timescape Crinum. And I forget how, because I didn't watch the whole episode very thoroughly. But she somehow gets connected with some kind of time, something. And now she's out of sync with everyone else. So she starts out as an old woman. Let's say she's 90. She starts out as an old woman, like at the end of her life, and she's in sick bay. And when she wakes up in sick bay, her daughter is there, her grandson is there, Tom, her husband, is there, and she doesn't remember anything. And the doctor's like looking at her scans with Chakotay, I think, and is just like, yeah, it looks like her entire memory has been wiped. So she doesn't remember anything. It's like, they're like, is it some kind of senility or da da da? And so when she wakes up, she does not remember the last 9 years. She doesn't remember that history. She remembers when she joined Voyager and whatever the time was before this loop happened, but all of that space is gone. So now she's like, wait, I have a kid. Wait, I'm married. Wait, I'm old. Like all these things that she has to deal with. And also to be like, what is going on? Am I the crazy one here? Because yeah, it looks like you're the crazy one. Well, anyways, at some point she realizes that her body's full of these chronoton particles and they need to like neutralize them so that she'll stop jumping times and she can be back in sync with the correct time. So she manages to convince people. At this point, she's I was gonna say de-aged or youngified. She's youngified to where she looks just like regular Kes, except for she's got long flowing hair, which I really do love long flowy hair Kes. I also love the little pixie cut because I think it's cute. But long flowy hair Kes just looks so much more mature and adult, right? So now she looks like a 30-year-old. So who knows how old that is in Ocampan years. But I guess she's like 3.5 at this point. So now she's at this age and she I think she has a daughter, but maybe her grandson hasn't been born yet or something like that. And in any case, this is when she figures out what's going on, and this is when they come up with the plan. So they end up creating some kind of like, it's like a hyperbaric chamber in sickbay. It looks so cool. Like if you haven't seen this episode, it's worth looking at just for the visuals, but it's a really cool like chamber that they put on top of one of those little sickbay beds. And so Kes slips into it like a little tube and they start neutralizing all the chronoton particles. So she's feeling like, okay, great. Now we're at the bottom of this. Once they get all neutralized, I'll be in sync with time and I can move forward. But while she's in there, she has another flash and boom, now she's back in the past again. And now she's got the cute little pixie hair. And now she's back in the pilot episode when Neelix and Kes were trying to convince Janeway to keep them on board. So she wakes up in this time back when she was kind of like a really innocent, naive little girl on Neelix's arm, following his lead, but she's not that girl anymore. So Neelix is sitting there going, Captain, I think you're going to need us, and I'm a great cook, and Kes is a really nice person, and you're going to really love us on the ship or whatever. And Kes is kind of looking around, and she's like, okay. She's like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Captain, I need your help. I'm going backwards in time, da 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 da. She lays everything out, and Neelix is quick to shut her down because if you remember season 1 Neelix, that's all he did. So he's quick to shut her down and be like, I'm sorry. She's usually like not like this. I promise you she's a lot more stable and sane than she appears at this moment. And he's like, please let us on your ship. And Captain Janeway's like, stop talking. Let me hear what you're saying. And she's like, listen, I'm from the future. I'm from 8 years in the future or whatever she tells her. And she's like, and this is what's going on. There's chronoton particles. We need to create this hyperbaric chamber that's going to neutralize them. So I stop jumping. And while she's talking, another flash happens. And you're like, because Janeway was believing, Janeway was listening. She's done enough time travel to know it when she sees it, Kes flashes, and now she's back on Ocampa, and she's like 12 years old in human years. So whatever that is in Ocampan years. And she's looking around, and some guy comes in, and she's like, Dad? And you're like, oh man, because they don't have this kind of hyperbaric chamber on Ocampa. Actually, they might. The caretaker might be able to whip it up real quick. But she's trying to convince her dad that she's really from the future, from a starship, and that she's grown and she's got chronoton particles. And he's not listening to anything she's saying. He thinks it's a dream or it's make-believe. And he shuts her down and is like, Kes, it's time for dinner. Like, stop playing this game. Go eat. But while she's like, you have to listen to me, Dad, she flashes again to the moment she was born. Which, of course, she couldn't explain anything to her mom then. And then she flashes again. And that's when she's going backwards from like, she goes to like a baby and then like a fetus and then like cells dividing and then nothing. And then suddenly it's like cells dividing, a fetus, a baby. And she kind of zooms back and she wakes back up in sickbay with her beautiful, long, mature Kes hair. And the doctor is like, all right, cool. Chronotons have been neutralized. You're back in sync with us. All is well. And she's like, whoa, that was a lot. One of my favorite things from this episode is she gets to keep the hair. This is how we know Kes has officially graduated to that next age group, right? To that next decade of life is because she has the long hair. At the end of the episode, she's talking with the rest of the crew in, I forget what they call it. What do they call that place in the holodeck where they just like have drinks and stuff? It's like a tiki bar. She's in that place, which the name escapes me, but she's in that place and they're all having like a big party, a big Kes is alive party, I guess. They're having a party in her honor. And they're all like, tell us what you saw, Kes. What happened in the future? And apparently at one point in the future, B'Elanna dies and Kes was the one who helped Tom like recover from that. And that's why they got married, something. So she's like, oh, I want to know that B'Elanna dies. And there's all these things that she's seen, but of course she doesn't say anything. And Tuvok is like, temporal prime directive, you can't say anything. And he also says, but it's just one possible future. Like any futures could happen now. And as long as you write it down in a report, that's all that needs to happen. So that's kind of how it ends. She doesn't tell anybody anything. And she just says, yep, it was just one possible future. Anything could happen, which I totally agree with. I don't know if it would make any difference if she told them what she saw in the future. Let me know in the chat. What do you think about the temporal prime directive when you go to the future? Do you think it makes any difference to the people in the past when you come back? Is it going to make them make different choices? Are they going to be like, oh, how interesting? Is it going to ruin your entire future? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the chat. I'm going to check the chat and then we're going to hit episode number 6. Okay. There was a lot. Okay. Chaotic Truth says it was very odd that Harry was in command on the bridge in this episode. I think that was talking about probably the last episode. Hold on, Future's End. And then PS2 Cypher says, wow, a whole 9 years. Yep, 9 whole years of life, which is crazy. Chaotic Truth says, was this the episode where she died? Yes. She didn't die as an old woman, if that's what you mean, no. But she did kind of like Benjamin Button back to non-existence, but then she came back to being existent. So maybe. Then Chaotic Truth says that Kes was the Wesley Crusher of Voyager. Let's be honest. That's pretty funny. Wingray says, I like this episode, but yes, the odd couplings in the alternate futures are creepy. Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe it's the odd couplings. I'm not really sure what it is, but there's something about this episode that like makes me feel some kind of way. It's a cool idea though. But something about it when I'm watching it, I'm just like, ooh. I think maybe, and then like at one point when she goes back, like in her skips, she finds Tom and she's like, Tom, I need to talk to you. And then B'Elanna comes up and is like, there you are. And they start kissing. And Cass is like, oh, because she's been married to him this whole time until now. And then she's like, oh, you must be B'Elanna. And B'Elanna's like, of course. We've known each other for years. It's just kind of weird. Chaotic Truth says Cass and Neelix were completely useless characters. I don't know. I think I enjoyed Cass. I know she's not for everyone, but I enjoyed Cass. And I loved seeing her growth and her development over the seasons. Like going from a naive, I would agree, useless person at the beginning of season 1 to being just as good as the Doctor. I think it's pretty impressive. And she's the only other person on the crew who is as good as the Doctor. And then Neelix, also pretty useless season 1. I mean, I guess he cooks a lot of Leola root, so that's interesting. But I really like Neelix in season 7. Like and I think he changes quite a bit in season 1 because he's so insufferable in season 1. But I think by the time they get to season 2, he's kind of changed his character a little bit. But season 7, I really like him. I love how good he is with the kids, with the Borg kids. I love how good he is with Naomi Wildman. Like, I think he's a really like sweet, kind of lovable person at that stage. And I also think it was a good idea to make him an ambassador because he does have that kind of personality. So I'm not opposed to either of these characters. PS2 Cypher says season 1 Neelix was very controlling. Yes, controlling. He was the worst. And just with Kes, he was absolutely the worst. But even without Kes, he was kind of a nightmare. Okay, with that said, let's go to episode number 6. This comes from season 6, episode 23, and it is called Fury. This is another Kes episode. So way back in, I didn't look this one up. Way back in the episode The Gift, which I don't remember. Let me see I don't remember which episode that was. So maybe it had to be season 3, something. Hey, you subscribed. Thanks for subscribing. Season 3, I guess, at the end. So at some point in the episode The Gift, Kes, she metamorphoses. Okay, I can't say that word. She transforms into the most advanced form of an Okampa. She basically turns into a beam of light. And she goes into a shuttle. She goes to explore the universe by herself to see what are all her powers and her capabilities. And she's kind of transforming and she's destroying the whole ship because of her transformation. So they put her on a shuttle. She turns into a beam of light. And then that light wraps around Voyager and throws it. And it ends up 10 years closer to home. And she's gone off. And we think she's gone the way of John Doe from Transfigurations in Star Trek The Next Generation. She's turned into light. She's gone into the ether. She is one. We are her. But somehow she's not. She is corporeal. She still has a shuttle because in this episode, Fury, she comes back to Voyager as an older woman, like that 9-year-old Ocampan we saw in the previous episode. She comes back and she comes back with a vengeance. So when she first comes back and hails the captain, she's like, I really need your help, Captain. And Janeway's like, yes, whatever you need, come on in. And then she proceeds to ram the ship. She slams her shuttle into Voyager, causing all kinds of damage. She beams herself over to deck 11, which is where engineering is, and she's ripping up bulkheads and panels and everything's blowing up. And she's using, I think the internet called it neurogenic energy or something like that. She's using like telekinesis, ripping everything apart. So she's just walking and looking really angry, and it's just ripping stuff, and stuff is exploding behind her. It looks so cool. It's probably one of my favorite scenes probably in all of Voyager, other than the season finale, is just seeing like Kes walking in rage, and it's like boom, boom, boom behind her. And they like put up force fields, and she's like, she walks through them, and somehow her walking through the force field makes it explode. So it's like watching a Michael Bay movie. Everything's exploding. The security guards are coming towards her, and she looks at them and they fly back. She goes into engineering, and everybody's like running and upset, and B'Elanna she's like, Kes, is that you? And Kes looks over at her and like blasts her and kills her immediately, and goes over to the warp core and puts her hands on it. And then she like absorbs all this energy and disappears. Then she wakes up back in time on Voyager. She finds her younger self in the hydroponics bay, and she sedates her and hides her in like what are those little drawers called that are underneath beds, like the little Murphy bed or whatever it's called, the little drawers underneath. She like finds a little drawer and stuffs her old self in there and puts her in the drawer. And then she proceeds to sell out Voyager to the Vidians, who have been looking for Voyager at the time so that they could harvest the entire crew for organs. So she sells them out to the Vidians and says, I will give you our location, our code, so you can come find us. All I ask is that you let me and my passenger get safely away. Her passenger is young Kes, and her goal is to take young Kes back to Ocampa. And here's the thing. In these 3 years since she has left the ship, she was supposed to be exploring the galaxy and exploring her powers, right, and growing. But apparently that didn't work out so well. Something happened. We don't find out what, but it's been like a hard, miserable, awful 3 years, which really sucks, because those were the last 3 years of her life. So it's more like it's been an awful, hard 30 years, which just really, man, she should have just stayed on the ship. But anyways, so it's been a hard, awful time, and she blames Voyager for kidnapping her from Ocampa and putting her on this path. And if only she had stayed home with her people, she could have been happy and naive and just satisfied with her life, which she knows herself. If that was true, she would have never left, right? But anyways, this is her big plan. She says, I'm too developed, I'm too changed, I'm too different for the Ocampans to accept me now. But if I take young Kes back to Ocampa before it's too late, before she changes too much, she might be able to fit back in and then live out her happy life so that my miserable life would not have happened. In this space battle, when the Vidians are trying to destroy Voyager, Janeway stumbles upon both Kesses in the hydroponics bay and ends up turning her phaser all the way up to 10 or whatever, and blasts Kes and kills her, like older Kes. And then when younger Kes wakes up, she's like, I need your help to prevent this from happening. So then time kind of resets, and we're back at where we start at. And the 9-year-old Kes is like, Captain, I need your help. And she's like, come on in. And she looks over at Tuvok, because Tuvok was also in on it. So the two of them work together to prevent all this damage from happening in the future. So Tuvok and Janeway look at each other and they're like, let's go. And Chakotay's like, hello? What? Wait, are you going to tell me what's going on? What's going on, Captain? And they just leave. So because they knew that Kes was coming, they clear out all of Deck 11. They clear out all of engineering. They put up their shields before Kes has a chance to ram into them so that her shuttle's A-okay. And so when Kes comes on the ship, she's expecting to just like do some damage. She still blows up all those bulkheads. But when she comes into engineering, it's completely deserted. And she's like, because she wanted some resistance, right? But she's like, all right. So as she's heading towards the warp core, young Kes appears as a holographic recording and is like, hey, remember me? Please don't do this. You left Ocampa voluntarily. It was your choice. You left the ship, the Voyager, of your own accord. That was your choice. Don't destroy this by blaming other people for your choices. And right at that time, Chakotay, Tuvok and Janeway come in, armed, of course, to also talk to her. And the hologram kind of disappears. And as Janeway is talking to older Kes is like, oh my gosh, I remember now. I remember making that recording and I remember who I was. And I remember, oh wow, like, and it all comes back to her. And she's like, I was so angry over these last few years. I was so confused. I was blaming you for everything. And she was like, now I don't know what to do. Like, I just don't have a home. I have nowhere to be. You know, I have nothing. And Janeway is like, you have a home. You have a place to be. Stay with us. Stay on the ship, which she totally could have done. Like, just stay on the ship. And that would have been really cool. Like, I know the actress couldn't stay on the show, but like, how cool would that have been to have like older Kes? I mean, she was already at the edges of her life anyways, but just to have her for like one more mission or like, and then maybe we could have had a funeral for her and then we could have grieved Kes, which would have been really sad. Like, I don't want that, but it maybe would have been cool to bring her back on the show and just, maybe one more mission where she uses these cool superpowers that she has now against the Borg or something. Anyways, we don't get any of that. Janeway she says, I can't stay on the ship for whatever reason. And Janeway says, well, you said you can't go home, but does it really matter which Kes goes back to Ocampa? And so she's like, yeah, I guess that's true. So I guess she decides to just go back to Ocampa. And I guess she makes it. I don't know. We don't know. That's where the episode ends. And Janeway and Tuvok are looking at each other. And Tuvok's like, what did we tell the others? Because Chakotay did look really confused on the bridge. And Janeway says, we'll just tell him that a friend got lost. And we helped her find her way. Oh, before she leaves, she ends up beaming back to her ship, right? So it's Janeway and Tuvok in the transporter room with Kes. And they also let Neelix in on it. So he comes and gives her some Leola root. And it's actually a really sweet scene because he's like staring at her and she's like, see anyone you know? And he's like, I'm just looking at you. Like, it's just, like he just has stars in his eyes. Like he's still in love with her, even as like a 90-year-old, super angry, super powerful, woman that she's become. And it's just, I don't know, it's a sweet moment. And she leaves. And that is the end. So I actually like this episode. I know some people are like, I know one person told me, she was like, I don't consider this episode canon because she turned into a ball of light last time we saw her. So why is she not a ball of light anymore? But I think this is a fun episode. And I love the like jumping back in time and seeing the conflict with the Vidians because we hadn't seen them for a while. So I don't know. All around, I'm a fan of this one. So I'm going to check the chat and we're going to hit episode number 5. Okay, let's see. Nadia says, yeah, Fury is insane. Wingray says the gift is episode 2 of season 4. Okay. See, I always thought Kes left like at the end of season 3, but I guess she leaves at the beginning of season 4. And I guess 7 must come in season 4 then. EAE says, I wanted to buy the entire Voyager series on digital, but it was SD only. Hope it, along with DS9, gets an HD remaster someday. I can't see why it wouldn't, especially since they've kind of collected everything on the Paramount Plus. It seems like they want to keep the franchise going. So I don't see why I wouldn't get an HD remaster at some point. PS2 Cypher says, oh, I like this. PS2 Cypher says, I like to think that she joined the Traveler and Wesley. That'd be neat. That'd be super neat. That would be super neat. This is a case where maybe, would I get irritated if I saw the Traveler again? I don't know, probably. Because when he came to take Wesley away at the end of season 7, or yeah, at the end of season 7 of Star Trek The Next Generation, I just thought that episode was really dumb and I was kind of mad at the Traveler for that. So would I not love it if the Traveler popped up and like snuck away with Kes? I don't know. But I really like the idea of Kes like doing that. And maybe they're all hooked up with Q too. They're all just like cruising the continuum. Best of Trek, worst of Trek says Fury is probably the worst time travel plot in Trek, and it's maybe the worst Voyager episode of Voyager overall. That's interesting. Why do you think that? Because I love this episode. So let me know why you think it's just a terrible episode. Chaotic Truth Live says the Vidians are unworthy of assimilation. The Vidians actually were really technologically advanced and quite bright. But because of that phage that just devastated their people, their technology, all their technological prowess went towards survival. And that's when they became this like kind of cannibalistic species. In the episode Think Tank, the character played by Jason Alexander, who I'm totally blanking on the character's name, but one of the characters, the guy who's in charge of Think Tank, says that they found a cure for the Vidian phage. So it'd be really interesting to go to Where Are They Now? And maybe they do this in Lower Decks because I haven't finished the entire show. But it'd be really cool to get a Where Are They Now? Like, who would the Vidians become if they no longer had to go cannibalize other people for their organs? That might be interesting. Great and Square says, hey there, I love me some Voyager. Same. PS2 Cypher says, not enough money to convert the film stock to digital. Oh, is that a hard thing to do? Bummer. Windgrace says, yeah, Seven joins and Kess flings Voyager out of Borg space when she, oh yeah, right. Yes. When Kess leaves, she flings Voyager safely away from Borg space. And they're like 10 years closer to home or something like that. Okay, let's go to episode number 4. Nope, wait, sorry, episode number 5 on the list. This is a two-parter. This is season 4, episodes 8 and 9, and this is called Year of Hell. Love these 2 episodes. They are gritty and dark and sad, but they're so interesting. They're so interesting. And as far as time travel, like this is what it's all about. So basically, there are a people in this group of space called the Crinum Imperium. And they were once very powerful, but at the time that Voyager comes into this disputed area of space, they're no longer very powerful. And there's another species, I forget what they're called, the Kell or Shrell or something like that, who are like the dominant species in this area. And the Crinum are like fighting against them, but they're pretty weak and just pretty ridiculous. But while Voyager is watching this little conflict go on, some kind of temporal wave hits them, and suddenly the Crinum ship is this huge ship, and it starts blasting at Voyager, and Voyager's taking all this damage, and they're flying away trying to escape. And you're like, what the heck just happened? Well, come to find out that the Crinum have, there's one guy who has built this technology called a time ship. So it's this one guy and a whole crew full of Crinum, and they have this ship that is able to, with a blast, kind of like a phaser beam, but like a temporal beam. I forget what they call this beam. It does temporal incursions where it can just delete all life from a planet, from a starship, from whatever. And what it's doing is it's going to various alien species' home worlds, and it's beaming over the entire planet and destroying all life on that planet of all time. So it's like erasing the species from existence. It is, we don't even have a word for this. It's genocide, but like temporally. It's like erasing you from ever having existed before or after. It's nuts. And this Crinum captain believes that what he's doing is right because he wants to restore the Crinum Empire to full glory, to the glory it had before he created this device. So it had a bunch of glory. It lost the glory. They didn't have as much, space, like physical space that was their territory. They had less and less territory. So he created this time ship to try to get back to their former glory. So every time they would do one of these temporal incursions where they would just wipe out a whole species from existence, they would check the percentage of Crinum Imperium awesomeness. And so they'd be like, oh, it restored our timeline to like 30%, or it restored it to 60%, or it restored it to 90% or whatever. Let's say the highest they ever got was 92%. And everybody on the ship is like, yay, good enough for us. Like the Crinum's in charge. We've got all that space. We're amazing. Like, let's stop with the time ship stuff. I think we're good. We have all the power. Like, we're good. But in one of these incursions that the captain did, I think his name's Anorak. Yeah. In one of these incursions that Anorak did, he destroyed a species that had some kind of genetic immunity that created this, that created that, that prevented this plague from happening with the Crinum. And that plague ended up killing his wife. So by killing this other species, the domino effect was that his wife was destroyed. And so all of these incursions, even though he's telling his crew that it's to get the Crinum Imperium back to superiority, he really is trying to bring his wife back. And no matter how high the percentages are, that one little space never comes back. The outpost or whatever his wife was on never comes back. And whenever it's not back, he's like, okay, do another incursion, do another incursion, do another incursion. So he's just wiping out species left and right. They've been doing this for hundreds of years at this point. And the crew is tired and they are not happy. They're kind of trapped. They're trapped as much as anybody else. Anyways, Voyager gets caught up in the mix. Somehow Chakotay and Tom get kidnapped by the Crinum ship, which I don't remember how that happens. If you remember, type it in the chat, because I don't remember how that happens. But that happens some kind of way. And Tom starts talking to the crew, and he realizes how unhappy they are. And he's like, I think we can turn them against Anorak, right? Because they just want to stop. They don't want to do this anymore. And I remember there's a scene where one of the, I think it's like the first officer or whatever on the time ship is talking to Tom. And he was like, I used to celebrate my loved ones' like birthdays and stuff like that until I realized I was celebrating the dead. They've been dead for hundreds of years. What am I even doing? Which is just like such a poignant statement. It always stuck with me. And so Tom is like, all right, I think we can turn the crew against Anorak, get them to shut this whole ship down and stop what they're doing and stop trying to find Voyager. And Chakotay's like, well, I think I can convince Anorak not to stop what he's doing, but he starts digging into the math or whatever. He's like, I think I can work with Anorak to restore his wife, basically the little colony that had his wife, and then he will stop of his own accord. He will choose to stop. And he's like, I think I can figure this out. So they're kind of coming at it on two fronts. At the same time, there was this undetonated like torpedo or something that from the Crinum ship that hit Voyager at one point. At this point, they're like hiding out in a nebula. And Seven is able to use that technology to create some temporal shielding around Voyager so that every time there's an incursion and these time waves go through, it doesn't affect Voyager. So yay for Voyager. Now it can stay in one time period, but boo for Voyager because of that, it affects what Anorak is trying to do. So when he wipes out a species, the math isn't mathing, and he figures out it's because Voyager must have temporal shielding and they're messing everything up. So now he's like, okay, well, we have to find Voyager specifically. Like, forget all these other planets we're destroying. We need to find Voyager specifically and destroy it. So now he is on a mission to find and destroy Voyager. Chakotay's trying to stop him and convince him there's another way. Paris is like, forget all this. Let's just get the crew to turn on them. Ultimately, it's a combination of all these things. There's no way to bring Anorak's wife back. But Chakotay sides with Paris. The crew turns against them. Janeway gets a bunch of allies because that is what Janeway does. They all have temporal shielding, and then they all get this huge battle with the time ship. Ultimately, Janeway rams her entire ship into the time ship, blows everything up, and the only reason it worked is because the crew let down the shields, blows everything up, and time is reset. Voyager comes back to the same space. Somebody says, hey, this part of space is under dispute. We recommend you go around. And they're like, cool, thanks for letting us know. And Voyager turns around and they go around space. How do you do that? I don't know. But somehow, I guess you know the markers, and they go around space. And then we see Anorak working on a design for a time ship with his wife in the next room, who's like, put down your work. Let's go outside and have some tea or whatever she says. And he's like, okay. And that's how the episode ends. So it's hopeful in the sense that time resets. Janeway's alive. The crew is happy and healthy and well. Nothing bad happened. Anorak gets his wife back. But it's also ominous because you see on his data pad that he's still building the time ship. So it's kind of like time didn't reset that much. You know, like he's still going to do it and all this is still going to happen. Voyager's just not going to be there to stop it. Or at least that's the take home I took from it. Let me know in the chat if that's not, or in the comments if you took a different take home message from that episode. But the Year of Hell episode, or the episodes, I think are really, really good. They're some of my favorite episodes of Voyager, especially when it comes to time travel. So I'm going to check the chat and then we're going to hit episode number 4 on the list. Let's see. Nadia says Year of Hell is so good. And Win Grace says chronicide. Yeah, wouldn't chronicide be killing time though? Like killing time itself? I don't know. Best of Trek, Worst of Trek says, I didn't like Fury because Kess's motivations don't make sense. And it always felt very out of character for her. I was excited they brought her back and then just kind of ruined the character for me. Yeah, I will agree with you there that Kess's motivation, like the way Kess is acting does not make sense, which I think is what they're trying to address with young Kess, who's like, hey, this isn't you. This isn't me. This is not how we are. I think it was an excuse for them to show us how powerful Kess has gotten and to bring her back on the show. But yeah, it's that I think they were making that point that this is not what regular Kess is supposed to be like. That's a bummer that it ruined that character for you, though. Yeah, I could see that because you're like, why is she so bitter? But in the end, she's not bitter. She's back to normal Kess. Okay, so is it Iron Woman? Is that what that is? Because if it is, I love the screen name. It says, I am watching the Voyager series right now, and that was a great storyline. Yeah, I totally agree. Best of Trek, Worst of Trek says, I'm not big on stories that never really happen, but Year of Hell is done so well. Yeah, I feel like aren't all time travel episodes never really happen? My co-host for the TNG podcast, Andrea, she always calls those like time stone moments, right? Where you're just like, time stone, and it's just like undone. And she finds that really lazy and kind of insulting for the viewers. I honestly don't mind it. I don't mind it. I'm just like, cool, give me a good story. If the story ends with a reset button, is it lazy? Yes. But was it a good story? That's really all I care about. Okay, so Best of Trek, Worst of Trek also says, I'm still not sure how it's not a time loop with Anorak working on the calculations at the end, though. I don't think it is a time loop, because what I think it is like different time, like not different timelines, but I guess so, different timelines, different paths that people could take, right? Different paths that all of these alien species could take, that Janeway could take. And I feel like Anorak, his path, one of his paths is to make the time ship. And he's still choosing to do that in this restored timeline. He's still on that path. Will it turn out exactly the way it did before? Maybe not. Maybe this time his wife won't die. Maybe this time it'll be somebody else, you know? But I don't feel like it's a time loop, because if it was a time loop, we wouldn't have come back when Anorak is making the design. We would have come back when Anorak is using the design. But that's just my thoughts. But yeah, I agree with you. It's done so well. It's so fun to watch. Graydon Square says Year of Hell was a glimpse into how bad it could have gotten in the Delta Quadrant. Yeah, I'm pretty glad that I'm pretty glad that they didn't go this route for all of the episodes, to be so gloom and doom and desperate. Yes. So there's is it part 1 or part 2? You know, where they're like Chakotay gives Janeway a watch as like for her birthday present, and he's like, this watch, it reminds me of old ship captains of back in the day on the ocean, and something. He has a whole story behind it. It's a really, really sweet gift. And Janeway's like, it needs to be recycled. And Chakotay's like, it's a gift. And she's like, this could be a pair of boots for somebody. You know, like, this is so important. This needs to be rations. And he's like, I replicated this months ago before any of this happened. Because by the way, this whole back and forth cat and mouse game fighting battle has been going on for like 2 solid months. So the Voyager is hanging out in a nebula hiding, and their ship is just beaten to crap, and they're all on rations, and it's awful. And Janeway's just like, recycle it, like, and it's just so heartless. But in the end, when she does ram her ship in, she's like wearing the watch, like she's got it. So she didn't recycle it. She did have some sentimentality, even in like the worst of times. But I agree with you, Graydon. Like, this is how it could have gotten, especially in season 1. If you remember, all the way back when they first started, their whole mission was like to find dilithium. That's all they wanted to do, because they didn't have enough power for food, for the replicators, for the holodeck, which I think is like one of the most important things on this ship. If you have a 70-year trek back home, I think it's food, medical stuff, like make sure the doctor is cool, and the holodeck. Like, those are like the main priorities in my mind. And I'm so glad they didn't go that route. They didn't make it a show about survivalists, because I think that might have gotten old or exhausting. I'm not sure. Wingrace says we end up getting a Crinum time weapon in Discovery, so he probably got back to his own shenanigans. Yes. So here's something that's interesting. In the episode that I mentioned a little earlier, Before and After, I think is what it's called, the one where Cass Benjamin Buttons, she mentioned something in the episode where she says something about the Crinum, and that was like a season before. And then in this season, we see the Crinum. We're like, oh, so it seems like they're just a species that does time control stuff. And I did just watch that episode of Discovery with the Crinum time bug. So freaking interesting. Like, I'm a fan of what they did with the Crinum. This was just a clever idea. And of course, it would be Voyager that would come up with the Crinum, because they're all about time travel. Iron Woman is saying yes, which I think is saying yes to that's how you say your name, your screen name, which is so fun. PS2 Cypher says, I really like the ending of Year of Hell. Yeah, I'm thinking you mean the explosion part, like where she says something. Oh man, I'm totally blanking on it. She says something before she rams into the ship, and you're just like, it's the most Janeway moment that you can ever Janeway. Wingrace says Year of Hell is just a normal day for the Equinox, but the Equinox brought it on themselves. I'm not even gonna feel bad for them. They brought it on themselves. Oh, okay. PS2 Cypher says, no, the good part is when he gets his wife back at the end. That is really sweet. And you can tell they really do love each other. And I do hope that he doesn't go and destroy all these other planets and also her. Like, just be happy doing what you're doing. It's kind of like, this is where you want to put your, this is your legacy. You want to just go around destroying whole peoples. I don't know. Anyways, okay. Now we're going on to episode number 4 on the list. This comes from season 5, episode 6, and it is called Timeless. So all these episodes, I think starting at Fury and up, are like episodes I just freaking love. Like, I love these episodes. I love Timeless. This is an episode I can watch over and over and over. This is the episode where it starts out with Harry, Kim, and Chakotay, who are 15 years older. They've got the salt and pepper, gray in their hair. And they come upon Voyager, which is trapped in the surface of this planet covered over with ice, and everyone on the ship is dead. And you're like, what the heck? happened. I remember viscerally watching this episode for the first time in that opening scene, and you're just like, Voyager can't be, well, okay, maybe Voyager crashed, but surely the whole crew got away. And then you see the crew like covered in ice, and you're like, what? And then Harry and Chakotay are older, and you're like, what? I mean, this opening was really, really strong. Anyways, so we come to find out that, rewinding back 15 years to the Voyager present, they want to check out the slipstream technology that I believe, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the technology they got from that guy who tried to trick them because of what they did with species 8472 and letting the Borg like be successful. I think he had used this slipstream technology. He dangled it as bait for them to try to like kidnap the whole crew and then send them into Borg space so that they could be assimilated as a, in revenge because his planet got assimilated. Anyways, so they have this technology that didn't work out, by the way, but they have this technology, and Harry's like, okay, I think we can use this and we can get home instead of taking another, like 50 years at this point. We can get home in like 5 hours. So they refit the whole ship with the slipstream drive. But there's something about navigating the slipstream that they can't do from the ship because it's too bulky, something. So Chakotay and Harry take a shuttle and they navigate in the slipstream directly in front of Voyager, and they send back the calculations so that they can like calculate in real time how to adjust things so that they stay inside of the stream. Well, when they go into the stream, the adjustments that the shuttle is sending back don't work. And Voyager comes out of the slipstream and they crash into that icy planet and it kills everyone. But Harry and Chakotay stay in the slipstream and they get home. And in that moment when the Voyager's coming out, Harry's like, we've got to go back for them. We've got to stop. Da-da-da-da. And Chakotay's like, no, because maybe Voyager might be able to survive coming out of the slipstream, but we certainly won't. Like our little shuttle will get crushed like a soda can. We have to stay in the slipstream until it dissipates or we reach our destination or however the technology works. So they end up getting home, and this eats them both up, of course, but especially Harry because he's like, my calculations killed the entire crew. So what they do is they steal all this technology, and they find the ship, and it takes them 15 years to find the ship, and they get the doctor's hologram working, and I think they take his mobile emitter, and they get him to extract from the corpse of Seven of Nine, like some node or something. And they have some future Borg technology that can send messages back through the Borg node, even back in time, which, right, there's the time travel. And so basically his goal, his whole idea is he's going to send Harry Kim the right calculations because he has had 15 years to think about it and 15 years to double check the math. And he's going to send Harry back the right calculations so that everybody will get back to the Alpha Quadrant in time. So while they're doing this, which I think they're on Chakotay's shuttle, and he's like, Harry Kim's like doing the whatever, and the doctor's like, what's going on? And he's trying to send back the right calculations into Seven of Nine's whatever. And Seven of Nine is getting the code back in the past, and he's like, okay, I'm getting a message. She's like, I'm getting a message. It says XYZ or whatever. And Janeway's like, that must be from Harry. He's figured out some other way to communicate with you because they lost comms inside the slipstream. So they do what they said, but then nothing changes. So Harry, older Harry, is like, no, these calculations were wrong. And he's like losing it, right? Because he's like, we're not going to get a second chance. Because, by the way, this part I didn't mention, Starfleet is after them because they are criminals. They stole all this stuff. They stole a ship from the shipyard. I think they're in the Delta Flyer, actually. They stole it from the shipyard. They stole the Borg technology. They're on the run. And who comes to get them? None other than Captain Geordi LaForge. Yay! This was like, I remember watching this too. I remember being like, oh, it's Geordi! Like, and totally freaking out. Captain Geordi LaForge comes and he's like, I gotta stop you. I cannot let you do what you're trying to do. I totally understand. I sympathize. But if you are successful, you are going to change the entire, future or history, or depending on how you're looking at past, history, future. You're going to change timelines for hundreds, thousands of people. Not just you. You have to look beyond your ship, and I can't let you do this. And Chakotay's like, you would do it if you were me. And Geordi's like, of course I would, but I'm not you, so you can't do this. So Geordi's ship is firing on the shuttle, and Chakotay's doing like his little Maquis tricks to try to escape or whatever. And Harry's in the back, while the ship is wobbling, trying to put in the calculations. And the doctor's like, just do another calculation, just send another one, like send as many as you need. And Harry's like, it took me 15 years to come up with this. I'm not going to come up with another one in 5 minutes. So what he ends up doing is sending the codes to just dissipate the slipstream, to just like close it or whatever. So that's what he does. The slipstream dissipates, in the past, and then Harry in the shuttle and Voyager are fine. They do end up coming probably 10 years closer to home again, but everyone's fine. Everyone's okay. Everyone lives. And Harry's just like, oh no, like I messed up. I did something wrong. Why didn't it work? Da, 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 da. And then inside of Seven's implant, somehow Harry had also left him, like future Harry had left a message for young Harry, kind of saying like what he did to save the ship. And it's just it's a really cool idea. I love seeing older Harry and Chakotay. I love how they're like, you know, on the run for the right reasons. I love seeing Captain Geordi LaForge. There's a lot of action in this one. There's a lot of heart in this one. You see Voyager get destroyed, which is like, oh my goodness. This is just a really, really good episode. Yeah. So in the end, of course, like any time travel episode, we hit the reset button. All is well. But we do end up a little closer to home. I really, really like this one. Okay, so I'm going to check the chat, and then we're going to go to episode number 3 on the list. Graydon Square says, was that the birth of Tank Top Janeway, or did we get Tank Top Janeway earlier? I do think Tank Top Janeway was born during the Year of Hell. Yeah, it was that last episode where she's like in the tank top and she's got her little jacket, I think, like wrapped around her waist or something like that. Wingrace says time's up. And Wingrace says, I think Macrocosm was the first stop for. Oh, okay. Was Microcosm the first time we see Tank Top Janeway? I'm not sure. Chaotic Truth says this was a great episode. LeVar Burton did an incredible job. I totally agree. Chaotic Truth says Harry Kim, even in this episode, was a buzzkill. I love Harry. I really do. And let me tell you, the actor who plays Harry seems like such a cool dude. Like I talked to him once, but I would definitely love to meet him again. He seems like such a cool dude. And I was a fan of Harry. He's just a sweet kid. Nadia says, yeah, Harry was a downer for sure. Yeah, in this episode, he was very I don't know. He was very like, he was very dark. He was very emo. We got emo Harry. That's exactly how he was. He was just like, yeah, well done, Harry Kim. You killed everyone you knew and loved. Yeah, he was very like the dark side of him, which you never see because he's always just like a happy, bubbly, like he calls himself Ensign Eager. And apparently this is how he was on set. The way you see him on the screen where he's just like, "Hi, Captain. Sure, right away." Apparently this is how he was on set as well as an actor, which I just think is really just fun. Country says, I think LeVar Burton directed this episode. Really? That's amazing. EAE says, I could listen to this woman talk all day. So could I. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you so much. Chaotic Truth says LeVar was a class act. I agree. Nadia says, I could listen to Andrea as well. I agree. Nadia says, butterfly in the sky. That's probably why I started watching this show, other than my mom making me, is to be like, oh, Reading Rainbow guy is also on this show. Chaotic Truth says, I could do a 2-hour live stream about why why the TNG phaser is gray, and it would be a great live stream. That's pretty funny. Graydon says, Harry Kim goes, they're having sex in the most deadpan way. Just too much comedy. Right. And he's like, who cares? Anyways, doop, 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 doop. And he's just like doing his thing. And the doctor's like, well, Harry, you're a little different. Nadia says, I knew you would sing it. You know me so well. Okay, episode number 3 on the list. This comes from season 5, episode 24, and it is called Relativity. So here we get Captain Braxton yet again. But in this episode, Braxton recruits 7 of 9 to help him save Voyager from a literal ticking time bomb. Someone plants a temporal bomb on Voyager such that when it explodes, it's going to erase Voyager from existence. So I guess this is like taking a page out of the Crinum playbook. This bomb is going to destroy Voyager's everything of existing. And I don't know if that affects the crew, though, because maybe they just would be on different ships. That I'm not really sure about. They don't talk about that too much. But anyways, the bomb is going to destroy Voyager, and it's bad news. So what Seven has to do is she has to jump into different time periods in Voyager's history to find when the bomb was placed, when and where the bomb was placed. So I think maybe they've narrowed it down to a Jeffries tube or something, or maybe she finds out where it's located, and then they have to figure out when it's located. Yeah, I think that's it. Because when she finds it in the Jeffries tube, there's like a force field or whatever. Like they can't get to it, so they can't like detach it. And now that I'm thinking about it, who said that earlier? It was Iron Woman, I think, who said that it's in Discovery. They similarly in Discovery, there's a Crinum time bug and they can't attach the bug because there's like a force field or something around it. Same idea. So they're like, okay, you got to find out, Seven has to find out when it was placed so she can stop it from being placed in the first place because they can't remove it. And we also get to see Voyager be destroyed in this episode because, it's like too late. And then basically Seven just keeps coming back to life or coming back awake on Braxton's ship. And then Braxton goes, hello, Seven, let me tell you your mission or whatever. And apparently she's already done this like 7 or 8 times or whatever. And apparently as well, there's something called like time psychosis, where if you do too much time travel, it messes with your brain, or space psychosis or something they call it. And so they're like, Braxton's second in command is like, should we keep doing this so much with her? Like if we do it too many times, it's going to mess with her brain. And Braxton's like, well, to make an omelet, you got to crack a few eggs. So Seven keeps going back in time and she eventually figures out when it was placed, and turns out it was placed at some time by another version of Captain Braxton. So she chases Braxton and catches him, I think, and they arrest him or something. I don't remember. I think they arrest him or whatever. And then when she goes back to the time to Relativity, which is the name of Braxton's ship, she's explained to them what happened. And Braxton's like, well, did you find the saboteur? And she's like, yes, it was you. And he's like, what do you mean it's me? I'm heading this investigation. How could it be me? And then his second in command turns on him and like pulls a weapon or something and is like, arrest this man. And he's like, what? What the heck? And so they arrest him. And 7 of 9 is like, what's going to happen to him now? And he's like, well, the one who set the bomb and this one are going to be integrated together, and then they're going to be tried like in a court of law and then punished or whatever. And 7's like, okay, cool, and goes back to her life. A couple things about this episode. One, watching 7 jump through all these time phases is so much fun. She goes back to Utopia Planitia at one point. At another point, she runs into like a ping pong match that she herself is in, that like her other version of herself is in. I mean, it's a good time. That's one thing. And then the second thing, we get to see Captain Braxton again. It's a different actor, but I actually like this actor a lot better. Or maybe I like the writing of this actor a lot better in this episode than when we first saw Braxton. Just so much more dynamic, so much more life, so much more backstory and history. But then the third thing, and this is a question I really had for you. Do you think that's fair that they arrested this Braxton, integrated him with that Braxton, and then they both get tried? Because I don't feel like that's fair. I feel like this Braxton hasn't done anything. His future self has done something. So yes, arrest that man. And maybe you can do some kind of, because apparently he was suffering from the time psychosis because of all the time travel he had to do, because of so much Voyager saving that he had to do. So apparently that's what like made him crazy. So it's kind of Voyager's fault all along, which is why he wanted to destroy Voyager so that he wouldn't go crazy. But my thing is like, I don't feel like that's fair, because current Braxton, who's investigating, he didn't do anything wrong. So is there any way, now that you know the future, that you could help him so he won't do that in the future? So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, do you think that policy makes sense? Do you think it doesn't make sense? Do you think it's only fair because if you do anything else, it breaks the temporal prime directive? I don't know, because I feel like I'm not able to see this from different angles. I can only see this in one way, and it just feels unfair to me. Yeah, okay, I'm going to check the chat and then hit episode number 2 on the list. PS2 Cypher says, that episode showcased Jerry Ryan's acting chops, which is the actress who plays 7 of 9. Yeah, 7 did get to do a lot of, I mean, this was like a 7 episode. This was a 7 of 9 episode, but we got to see all the other crew people that she interacts with too, which was super fun. Graydon Square says, this was the closest Minority Report style episode Star Trek ever had, kind of a pre-crime plot. And I completely agree with you. This was very much pre-crime. That's exactly what I was thinking. And that's something that Tom Cruise's character, I was trying to think of Tom Cruise's character's name. I don't know why. Tom Cruise's character in Minority Report said that at one point in the movie, where he was like, wait a minute, is it really fair that we're arresting people for crimes they might commit in the future, but we're not 100% sure they're going to commit? Like, is that really fair? Now, on one hand, some of these crimes are like super violent crimes, right? They were murders. And so it's like, you don't want to wait for them to kill someone to be like, if you knew they were going to kill someone, you don't want to wait for them to kill someone to arrest them and then to say like, oh, we're arresting you for murder. If you could prevent that, of course. So I see that, but also to be like, wait, now we find out that that's just one possible future. Like, one possibility is that they might kill someone. Another possibility is that they might just divorce that person, And so it's like, should we just arrest that person based on a vision that these precogs had of a future that may or may not happen? And I don't know the answer to that. I think that movie has so many layers. If you think about like society and law and all that, I think there's just so many layers for that movie. for this episode, it was like pre-crime, but applied to literally one person. And it was like, well, is this fair? Because I feel like future Braxton, who did the crime, is a criminal and should be punished. But like current Braxton, who's investigating said crime, what is he getting punished for? I don't know. PS2 Cypher says, it's about as fair as it was to kill Tuvix. Okay, that's an interesting take. Graydon Square says, I think it was totally fair to unaccident Tuvix. Ignore this, as it could go down a Tuvix rabbit hole. It will 100% go down a Tuvix rabbit hole. So that's why I'm going to save that. Because I think, yeah, no, we haven't had that conversation yet. That's a conversation I have not yet had on the channel. So we're going to save that because Tuvix, I think, is a longer conversation. Cat of Truth says Voyager was great, but it did ride the coattails of TOS, TNG, and DS9. I don't know if it rode DS9's coattails too much because it came out a year after DS9. So they were really concurrently running. But yeah, they definitely all ride the coattails of TOS in the sense that they're standing on the shoulders of giants. And they definitely both took lessons from TNG and then applied them in different ways to those two different shows, DS9 and Voyager, which I feel like did take TOS in totally different directions, right? Now we have a space station that doesn't move. Now we have a ship that does move, but it's in the Delta Quadrant. So I like those different angles that they put on it. Okay, episode number 2 on the list. This comes from season 7, episode 11, and it's called Shattered. It's another episode I freaking love. So in this episode, the ship is chopped up by some temporal anomaly. Some temporal anomaly hits the ship and it breaks the ship into a bunch of different time periods. So like whatever's going on in the mess hall is a totally different time period from the bridge, which is a totally different time period from engineering, which is a totally different time period from the holodeck and totally different from sickbay. And so Chakotay is immune to all of this because he gets these chronoton injections early in the episode for some other reason. And so now he's immune to these changes in like times. So as he's walking from space to space, he's walking through different time periods of the ship. I love this episode. This is like a history of the show. This is kind of like, if you remember that episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, Shades of Grey, that's the episode where Riker is like sick in sick bay and he's like having all these flashbacks. And it's a terrible episode. And if you don't remember it, don't watch it. But it is a flashback episode where they're trying to be like, we ran out of money. We don't know what else to do. So we're just going to show clips and we're going to have, Riker laying here while we talk about all his memories. This to me feels like 1,000 times better job of that. It's a clips show in the sense that it is talking about things that have already happened, but it's not at all a clips show because there's a whole story moving forward, which is what I find so interesting about this episode. And not only is the story moving forward, but we also get parts of the ship that are in the future. So we get to see Naomi Wildman and Icheb fully grown and part of Starfleet, which I freaking love. So anyways, this episode is great. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend watching Shattered. You get to see Chakotay is trying to like figure out what's going wrong. He ends up kidnapping the captain from the bridge, and the version of the captain is like season 1 captain who just entered the Delta Quadrant when the caretaker kidnapped them. So she doesn't know Chakotay. She was after Chakotay, but they don't have this trust. This is before they were stranded on the planet with the bathtub. This is before all of that from her perspective. So she does not trust him, and he's got to earn her trust. And he's like, look, we're friends. We have dinner together. I know your favorite book. You loaned it to me. You have your fiance gave you a puppy, like just trying to convince her. And so eventually he convinces her. They go all through the ship trying to figure out what's going on. And they end up creating like, what do you call those things that have all the bullets on them for machine guns? Those like belts of bullets. They have those belts, but instead of big bullets, they're like hypo sprays full of these chronoton injections. And what they're doing is they're going around the ship to key points in the ship. They're taking off some panels and they're injecting it directly into the ship's bioneural circuitry so that these like chrono particles can like flow through the whole ship and bring the entire ship together into one timeline. So that's the big idea. So they both have these like bullet packs or whatever. And, at first Janeway's like, maybe we should separate. And then they're like, no, maybe we shouldn't. Because you don't know what's coming. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. So they're going all around the ship, injecting things. And that's how they run into like Icheb and Naomi and all these different things. Well, they also run into Seska in engineering. And Seska is like, wait a minute. I thought I dropped you guys off on that M-class planet. What are you doing here, Chakotay? Right? So it's taking us all the way back to, I think it was Scorpion was the episode when that happened. Anyway, Seska is like, okay, I love your idea with the chronoton injections, but what you're going to do is you're going to inject everything so it comes back to my time period, when I'm in charge of the ship, and I'm going to stay in charge of the ship. So Chakotay and Janeway form alliances with all the other members that they found throughout the ship, like Naomi and Icheb and Seven of Nine when she was still a Borg drone, and all these other people. And they come and they defeat Seska and they return the ship back to its normal timeline. It's great. And then Chakotay, I don't know if he writes a report on all this or doesn't because temporal prime directive, but he's telling Janeway about the experience, I think. And they're having dinner and she says something about like, can't you tell me something? And he's like, oh, can't because temporal prime directive. And then she reveals some knowledge that makes it seem like she knows things that he's never told her. So he's like, how did you know that? And she's like, can't tell you, temporal prime directive. And you're like, oh man, there's been even more time travel in this show that we as viewers don't even know about. How am I even surprised? I don't know. But that is just the level of time travel nonsense that happens with this crew. This episode, though, is great. I highly recommend it. So I'm going to check the chat and then we're going to go to episode number 1 on the list, the top episode. Let's see. When Grace said Shattered is so fun. I agree. I could just watch it over and over and over and never get tired of it. Chaotic Truth says Shattered was a great episode. Grade and Square says my favorite Voyager time travel episode, just edging out Future's Edge, is this one. So I guess they're kind of like neck and neck for you, which was nearly perfect. See, I'm not a fan of Future's End, but I want to like it. So I love that that's your favorite episode. And I could understand why. And I wish it was also one of my favorites because it does have so many good points. Chaotic Truth says they did a great job with this episode. Grade and Square says seeing grown Samantha and Icheb was a treat. Wasn't it though? And I just love when they're like, wait, so Icheb, is that you? Like, I just love that. And then Naomi says, like, calls out as they're leaving because apparently the two of them disappeared years ago and no one's seen them. And so from their perspective, seeing Chakotay and Janeway is like seeing ghosts. And they're like, Captain. And earlier in the episode, Naomi Wildman was saying how she wanted to be like the captain's assistant or something like that. She always wanted to be the assistant to the captain. And so she's seeing the captain. She's like, I always wanted to be your assistant. It's just so cute, right? And as they're leaving, they like call out to Chakotay and they're like, we never told your secret about where you stash whatever, some liquor or something away from Neelix. And it's just was a cute moment. I agree. It was really special. Chaotic Truth says Michael Taylor wrote Shattered. His episodes were great. He wrote many of DS9's episodes. He wrote In the Pale Moonlight and No Wonder Why Shattered was a great episode. Okay, that brings us down to thank you for that. That brings us down to episode number 1 on the list. This comes from season 7. It's episodes 25 and 26, and it is Endgame. The season finale, the series finale for this show, so good. So freaking good. Like, I don't know, especially for Star Trek, I'm not really a fan of season finales just because it's like such a show, it's a show you love and it has to end and it's so sad and you just don't want to see it go. But I feel like this ending was just perfection. It was great. It was everything I wanted. I could not ask for more than this episode. I will say, in that conversation I told you about earlier that I had with Garrett Wang, who plays Harry Kim, he had an idea at the time that now I cannot unthink. But you know how those last few TNG movies were just like trash? So he was like, instead of making those trash movies, what they should have done was make a final movie instead of this series finale like this, make this like a final movie for Voyager as the finale, and to make a final movie for DS9 as a finale. And I was like that. I would have been in the theaters. I would have been watching it. Like, I would have seen it more than once. I mean, that would have been so exciting. And when he said that, I was like, shoot, now I wish they would have done that. Now I feel robbed. Now I feel cheated. But before he said that, I never had that thought. I never had the idea. So I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. In any case, that's neither here or there because it's not something we can do now. But these 2 episodes, I love. They are perfection. I'm going to be super generic in case you have not finished Voyager. Like if you're watching through Star Trek for the first time, which I know a lot of you are. So if you don't want any spoilers, just don't listen to anything at this point. Just hop off this video, hop onto the next one. But if you are going to keep watching, like maybe you're driving and you can't switch off, I'm going to try to be generic about this last episode, but I highly, 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 highly recommend if you're making your way through Voyager, do not skip. Okay, so in Endgame, we get to see a future Janeway, who is now Admiral Janeway. And, just from a very high level, she goes to the past to bring the crew home more quickly. We get to see the Borg. We get to see the Borg Queen, who is amazing. Probably one of my favorite characters in Star Trek is the Borg Queen. Such an interesting character. I just really love that character. And the actress who plays the Borg Queen is just incredible. So she comes back to help Janeway, Captain Janeway, and the crew get home faster. But in order to do that, she has to outsmart the Borg. And she also has to like get her hands on all kinds of technology. She has to work with the Klingons. She has to do all this stuff to try to rescue them. This is so hard to say without spoilers, right? I just want to talk about every single thing in the episodes. This part is a spoiler. They do end up getting home, and they get home in the most spectacular way possible. And I remember watching this episode. I remember when this episode aired and watching it and being on the edge of my seat, like, how are they going to do it? And it doesn't look like they're going to do it. And then they do it. And you're just like, I can't believe it. And it's like the last few seconds of the episode. And it's so exciting. And it's such a relief. And not only in these 2 episodes do you get lots of action and stuff like that, lots of closed loops on relationships, but you also get to see a lot of personal development. You get to see a lot of the relationships between the crew members, what they evolve into, you know, however many years in the future, what they're like now. And then at the very, actually, no, I'm not gonna say that part. I was gonna say at the very end, I'm not gonna say that part. Anyways, you get to see a lot of the crew dynamics, which is probably my favorite part about all of Trek, is just seeing how the crew interacts with each other and how they take on challenges and stuff like that. One of the things I do love about this episode is Admiral Janeway mentions how loyal the crew is to Captain Janeway. And because when Admiral Janeway comes on the scene, she expects them to all take orders from her because she's been given orders for quite some time. So she starts throwing around orders, do this, do that. I'm an admiral. You have to listen to me. And Captain Janeway is like, no, ma'am. No, ma'am, I don't. I don't know you. How do I know you're really me? Get out of here with that. And the rest of the crew is like, yeah, we don't know you. Sorry. And Admiral Janeway is just like, I forgot how stubborn I was. And I forgot how loyal this crew was to you. I can't believe they're not loyal to me. And I just love that because one of my favorite characters in Trek is Captain Janeway because I want to be a leader like her. I want to inspire loyalty the way she does. And that was just the epitome of it, that even your future self doesn't have the same amount of loyalty as your past self because of the connection that she had with the crew in that moment. It's beautiful. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Okay, I'm going to check the chat, and then I do have one honorable mention, and then that's it. So let's see. Chaotic Truth says Endgame was incredible in all caps. I agree. Especially when Voyager flew over the Golden Gate Bridge. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Chaotic Truth says Endgame, in my opinion, was better than All Good Things. I 1000% agree. Graydon Square says, hey, let's not get crazy. All of Trek is life. Chaotic Truth says that Janeway, Endgame shows that Janeway is genocidal. I don't know if that's what it shows. Maybe Admiral Janeway is. I will say Admiral Janeway just could care less at this point. Like, she's going to do what she needs to do. But I don't know if that's different from Captain Janeway. I don't think it is. PS2 Cypher says it was a good ending. PS2 Cypher says, do you want me to jump on a grenade for you? Like, I feel like that's something Janeway would probably do. Chaotic Truth says, Endgame shows us a world building on Vulcan society too. It shows us how the Vulcan mind can deteriorate over time. Yeah, there is some stuff about like Vulcans and stuff in there, which is interesting because it's also kind of like full circle, right? Is learning more and more about that culture. Okay, so here, that is my list of 10, but I do have one honorable mention, and this comes from season 1, episode 4, and it is called Time and Again. The reason why I threw this episode in is because all of the episodes I've mentioned actually encapsulate all of the time travel episodes on all of Star Trek Voyager. So there were only 11 episodes if you're counting a bunch of the 2-parters as one episode. So I figured I can't leave one out. They all got to be in there. So this one goes in the honorable mentions list. And in this episode, Voyager comes across a planet that has just been devastated by, let me see, what do they call it? Some kind of bomb, a polaric detonation. And it's devastated the entire planet. They beam down to the planet to find out what's wrong. And Tom and Janeway end up accidentally walking into these like temporal bubbles, and they get transported back to a few hours before the detonation. And it turns out this society that got destroyed is a pre-warp society. So now they've got to blend in, pretend like they're locals. Of course, some little kid sees them and is like, ghosts, monsters, demons. And they're like, oh, the little boy is just confused or whatever. And they're trying to like figure out what's the deal and how can we stop this detonation, because they find some clock. And so they know what the countdown timer is going to be, the same clock that they found in the future. So they're like, oh man, this explosion is going to happen in like 19 hours or whatever it is. So now they're on a quest to try to stop the explosion. Meanwhile, the rest of the away team is like, what just happened to the captain and Tom Paris? And so they discover that there's these time bubbles, and they're like, okay, we got to find a way to get them back through the time bubble. So Harry and B'Elanna create some kind of device that can like reopen these little bubbles big enough for the two of them to come back through. But it can only, they're only stable for like 13 seconds or something like that. And then when they collapse, they cannot open up, they can't use that device in that area ever again. So they have to go to find a new place because that part of space has collapsed on itself, something. So thankfully, Kess is starting to now, this is way back in season 1. So Kess is starting to realize that she has these telepathic powers, and she can sense Janeway. I don't think she can sense Tom, but she can sense Janeway. So she can tell where they've been. So they're using her as kind of like a compass to try to figure out where Tom and Janeway are. And they're going all around the planet or around this area to try to find them and open up the rift and bring them back. Well, in the end, it turns out that they open that rift in the exact wrong place on the planet, which is what causes the detonation in the first place. So Janeway figures that out right at the last second. She destroys the device through the little, tear that they're creating. And then again, time gets reset. The planet is well, healthy, and happy. Janeway scans the planet and realizes that they're pre-warp and is like, oh, I would love to meet them, but prime directive. And so they fly off into the distance. This episode, I think it's interesting. I do think it's interesting. They have these really bright outfits that kind of look like candy corn. And I, for one, like the candy corn outfits because I feel like they are so cosplayable. But my co-host very much hated the candy corn outfits because they are very weird and not that cute, but they're interesting. Anyways, I like this episode. I think it's interesting. I like the time riffs. I like trying to blend in. And Janeway is like smooth. Like she would make an exceptional con woman. Exceptional. Because every question they ask her, she's got an answer for everything. Oh yeah, they're like, where did you come from? We just came off the train right there. Where are you from? The South? Yep, that's right. We're from the South. I mean, she just like slipped right in as if she was a local. And luckily for them, these pre-warp aliens look exactly like humans. So, and it wasn't like Tuvok or somebody who got sucked into the portal with her. So everything just worked out. I think it's a good episode. I mean, it is the 4th episode of the show, and it's our 2nd time travel episode in 4 episodes. So it is a little bit like, oh, another time travel. Oh, but I think it's a good episode. Is it the greatest episode of all time? No. I would definitely put this I would put this as episode 0 if I had the list to do over, but I'm making it my honorable mention. So that is my list. I was going to say if there's something I missed, put it in the chat, but I mentioned every single time travel episode on the show. So if you had a favorite that I did not have that was a favorite, definitely let me know. I'm going to check the chat one more time, and then we're going to wrap it up. Let's see. Chaotic Truth was not a fan of season 1 Voyager. A lot of season 1s are not great, but they might have great episodes. I like season 1 of Voyager myself. But I didn't love I didn't love season 1 Neelix. I didn't love season 1 Doctor, but I like that, like the pilot is really strong. And I think all the season 1s will have some good episodes, even if season 1's a little bit rough. Graydon says Voyager's Endgame was better than Marvel's Endgame. Oof. Marvel's Endgame. What was the one before Endgame? Was it Civil War or something like that? I like that one better than Endgame. Endgame just made me mad. Chaotic Truth says she was so beautiful to me as a 12-year-old. I'm guessing you mean Janeway, maybe? Windgrace says, on a technicality, I would toss Coda into horrible mentions, even though time travel is a fake out. Coda. Did they do time travel in Coda? Oh, they did, because she kept flashing back to when she was a little kid, falling off a cliff. Yeah, you're right. You are right. Okay, so I did not mention every single episode. Okay, we'll throw in Coda. Okay, Windgrace. All right, I see you. Chaotic Truth says Marvel's Endgame is a masterpiece. Okay. Chaotic Truth says, I hate Coda. I actually like Coda. I like the message at the end when her dad's like, come with me to the dark side or whatever. And she's just like, my dad would never tell me what to do. He always told me to make up my own mind and make my own decisions or whatever. And was just like, wait a minute, you're not my dad. Man, get out of here. I like that. I like when she saw through it because I felt like it was a pretty solid bluff. So I always like it when people are smarter than me and see the things that I don't see as a viewer. Because as a viewer, we're supposed to like be smarter than them, right? Because we can see all sides. So I like that. Nadia says, great list. Thank you so much. PS2 Cypher says, another great stream. Okay, so now I'm just going to be reading my own praise. So I'm not going to I'm not going to read that. Infinity War. Okay, what did I say? All the war. Yeah, Infinity War. I really liked Infinity War. And then Endgame, I was like, can we have Infinity War back? Although I will say the end of Infinity. Okay, you guys will appreciate this more, I think, than anybody else on the planet. Did you or did you not feel at the end of Infinity War the same way you felt at the end of Best of Both Worlds Part 1 in Star Trek The Next Generation? Because I had the same feeling. The same feeling. I was like, what just happened? And why is there no closure? Why is this ending? Why am I seeing credits? What's going on? Like I had the same like shock, just complete shock. Like I remember thinking the same thoughts of going like, oh, that's so interesting. We only have 5 minutes left in this movie. How are they going to wrap it all up? Like, how are they going to hit reset and fix everything? And they didn't. And I was like, what just happened? It was the same feeling for Best of Both Worlds when Riker was like, Lieutenant Worf fire. I was like, how are they going to wrap this up? And then it was like, dun, 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 boom. And it just went off. And it was like, where's the closure? Can't do that to people, man. You can't be doing that to people. So Graydon says, does 1159 count as a time travel episode? Was there time travel in that episode? For some reason, I'm just remembering like holodeck stuff. Remind me of that episode. So maybe, but I don't really remember any part of it. So, okay. So, hey, Woody says, listening in. Okay. So I think that's going to make it a wrap. So thank you so much. Those are my 10 top time travel episodes of Star Trek Voyager with 1 honorable mention, maybe 1.5 honorable mentions if we throw in Coda. And I do not remember what 1159 was about. So maybe 2 full mentions, 2 full honorable mentions. Please join me next week and every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, where we talk all things Star Trek. Next week, I'm going to be joined by my Star Trek podcast co-host, Andrea. We co-hosted the podcast, the TNG podcast, and we're going to be talking about the worst couples in Star Trek, The Next Generation. So if you have any couples that you need to see on that list, feel free to drop it in the comments. Obviously, if you're watching in real time, I'll get a chance to see those comments and incorporate them. If you're watching this in the future, hi, future people. The episode's probably already live and you can just go watch it right now. Be sure to subscribe and ring that bell so that way you know every time one of these live streams drops. That is it for me. I will see you all next week. Have a good one.